But really, we don't have a clue how that mechanism works. What we can offer is very precise, very high resolution measurements of all the body parameters one can think of, and try to detect patterns that occur, changes in these parameters that might be related to, attitudes and intuition. I'm not even sure we really know what intuition is. I use the word just from a very layman point of view to say that perhaps our human brains are so advanced that they can execute certain algorithms which we don't know about, that makes use of all the sensory inputs in some way to predict or to guess, or very educated guesses about what other people are thinking about and so on. But if we do ever solve that problem, I think the world will be in trouble. The integrated results would be quite worried about that. Thank you.
That question struck a thought in my mind. Not so much to answer the question about intuition, but to start with the question about religious leaders. One of the things that I know religious leaders do is meditation. And meditation quietens the mind, and maybe that gets to the ability to have a sense of intuition. Now, talking about how do you break down this mind-body separation, which actually still is a Cartesian kind of dilemma. We tend to think that the spirit is quite separate from our body. But there's an interesting study which people are doing nowadays, which is, can we really detect actual changes at our things which can measure when someone meditates? So there's this interesting study going on where people actually take samples of blood and cells and they look at parameters, different parameters, including the genetic profile of cells obtained before and after meditation. Now this is a bit far off, but what I'm suggesting is that this kind of studies is beginning to give some impression about what actually goes on at the physical level when the mind is being active, and meditation quietens down the mind, and there's actually a physical correlate to that. So this kind of approach maybe begin to allow us to understand this complex. Maybe intuition can be broken down to some definitive parameters which you can understand in the end.
Actually, I just want to add one thing that I know about these religious leaders, and that is Sheng Yan Fa Si of Singapore. He has since passed away. Now, he has a friend whose wife got a stroke, and this lady stayed in the hospital. Now, the doctor who is in charge said, well, if you pass through several days, she would recover and you can go home. But Sheng Yan Fa Si was there, and he actually advised the family members to stay with her. And subsequently, Sheng Yan Fa Si was proven right. This is from a memorial book that's written about him. But my question is, about this old remedy for sleeplessness at night. There are old doctors who advise us to wear warm clothing at the feet or wear socks. That brings me to mind about your question about the pilots under severe gravity. Has it got to do with the circulation? And does this remedy really works? Thank you.
It works for me. Really, quite frankly, I don't know. In fact, sleep is another mystery. No, really, I'm serious. I was a student when Glial Dement started the sleep functions. And we now know sleep is essential. Sleep is associated with metabolism. The sleep deprivation not only enhances hypertension, diabetes, but also drop of brain cells, and the whole variety of issues. Why do we have sleep? What is sleep? Is still a bit of a mystery to us. But nevertheless, it's one of these complex physiologic issues that I think we're all looking forward to in the next century in dissecting, because as we get remarkably precise and have complete coverage of the molecular and physiologic events that occur in man, which we never were able to do before, except on averaging things. We now can actually start doing some progressive modeling. It's almost as if we were doing, weather predictions using some really precise mathematical models. Certainly, it's interesting that one of the most profound uses of supercomputers in the United States is actually modeling atomic explosions for the nuclear stockpiles using some very advanced mathematical approaches. The prediction from these sort of approaches using the heterogeneity of the system, taking into account the heterogeneous system, actually approaches reality. And that's what I think we're hoping, Bing and I, when we work together, we're trying to find that out in complex functions like sleep.
Thank you, Ed. Maybe just one last question so that we can begin too. So.
About supernatural religion or intuition, it reminds me of a theory discovered in Japan, and they found out the crystal shape of water, which can be influenced by the thoughts of people. So if you think about a great thank you, beautiful, these sort of words, and they can, and the crystal water a very, very beautiful shape. I don't know, have you heard of it or not, and whether it's true or not.
I even have seen a patent on this. It's considered to be, as a patent, not very useful. The theory behind is very difficult to understand, not with the mind, but just to make the point, having said that, it is indeed possible to structure water with other molecules. So water is a very, very strange medium. And it is indeed possible to structure water. But there is no evidence that this can be done by the mind, but there is ample evidence in nature that that molecules are able to structure water over long distances. Although this is very controversial, people like Jerry Pollack in Seattle is working on these kind of studies, and we are doing something which is not quite unrelated in our laboratory.
Okay, thank you very much. If you have other questions, please hold until the end of part 2, so that let us now begin part 2. May I invite Professor Ratna? Ed has to leave us for another meeting.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sun, for the invitation, Minister, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen and dear colleagues. I have no pictures. I have to strain your imagination with pure text. Minister, I have to make a confession. In my youth, I never saw a $6 million man, because it was not broadcasted in Central Europe. However, now comes to my recovery. I saw a sequel in January when I was in New Zealand. One rainy afternoon, we were staying in a hotel, so switched on TV, and they were running the 70s TV series, and there was the $6 million man. So I know what it is about, and interesting, in this particular sequence, this guy who has been fitted out with a lot of substitute limbs broke very, very heavy tables.